Hey, everybody, CodePen Radio number 407, where we're going to kind of share with you a little bit of how our Monorepo works. That's definitely something we podcasted about before our break. CodePen is one repo, with maybe an asterisk at the end of it, where very occasionally we make our own little sub repo for some reason. And we have this funny habit of doing that and then be like, we're going to pull that back in. It's got coming back, we'll like split something off and then regret it. But for the most part, I think we're all pretty happy with our Monorepo, and we have this like new part of it that serves some needs for us particularly well. To talk about that, I have Mr. Robert on. How you doing, Robert?
I'm doing well. Thank you, Chris. It's good to be back.
Good. Heck yeah. Robert's been with us since before our break as well. And so here's what we built. We sort of call it, at least that's what our show notes are calling it. We call it our CDN, or our public CDN, because the folder for it in our Monorepo is public. But I don't know if CDN's the right word. It feels like sort of the right word for me, because it ends up just being a bunch of files that we need URLs for on the internet. And I think of not all CDNs are public, I guess, but these URLs truly do need to be public. Like anybody can hit this URL, not just ourselves. So the CDN word feels weird only because it's like, it's not for anybody else, and we don't really use that word in our code base or anything, but that's certainly how I think of it. Yeah.
Yeah, I struggle with that as well. I look forward to hearing, actually, I was looking forward to talking to you about that, because that line between like, oh, it's just a file, let's stick it out there on the network, versus like, oh, it's an app that we have to actually like bundle and build, and and requires more structured tooling.
Oh yeah,
it gets very blurry, and especially I think, as we'll see
blurry
today in this public portion of our repo, I think we've kind of run into that gray area in between.
Gray indeed. Yeah. Okay. So, and I will say, some people think of like a public folder, because I think different software products use literally a public folder inside of them, and they're like, oh, that's where you just put static files that you kind of want to live outside of your build process, and they'll just, I don't know, get deployed and you'll have URLs to them. Rails does this. We have a public folder in our Rails repo, which we have abused for this purpose occasionally in the past. I think that's how Next.js works too. They have some version of a folder that's just like, I don't know, put stuff in there that you, like an image. Okay, cool. Now you have an image. Great. But their docs are like, well, a lot of times when you're using an image on a Next.js website, you want it to be not in the public folder. You want to put it somewhere else that is like accessible by the build tooling, because they'll do fancy crap for you. They'll optimize it and they'll serve it with this fancy HTML responsive syntax and stuff. But if you put it in that public folder, you're kind of opting out of that behavior.
That's definitely the blessing and the curse of the public CDNs is, like, you can just drop files in there and they wind up at URLs that are pretty obvious and intuitive, but you're getting just the raw file at just that obvious and intuitive URL. If you want to do anything outside of that, you're kind of stuck, because you're
stuck.
Yeah, it's like, okay. And so like, I think images are a good example of that. Like, if you want to optimize your images, do you do that before you stick them in the public folder?
Right.
If you want to,
maybe.
If you want to put a script in there, like, do you just write vanilla JS and try and optimize it? And like, ew,
yeah.
Like, who wants to do that? So
we have that problem. And then what if you change that file? That's almost the worst of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So different, and we have a Rails app and we have multiple Next apps, and like I said, we have a Monorepo. So we kind of don't want to use just like one of those software tools to use their public implementation. We're like, screw that. We'll have our own. And okay, so let's say we're going to build like the first dumbest implementation of this ever. We'd probably like not have any build process and not have any cache busting and not have anything. It just, you put an image in there. And I will say a good example of an image like this is a favicon. Just that URL that represents the tiny little browser thing. You don't really need that processed. You might not even need it versioned, really. You just have this URL, but all your sites need to reference that same URL. And I think our way around this in the past, which hence was one of the little, check marks on the list of like, yeah, we really should build this, is we just put the favicon in all the different sites. Like the Next apps had a copy of it, the Rails app had everybody's got a copy of it, and that was a way around it. Fine, but that doesn't feel great for us like dry at heart programmers or whatever.
Yeah, and well, you very quickly run into issues where you have multiple copies, they get out of sync with one another. Like if you want to change it, like where do they all exist? And it just,
Yeah, somebody just needs that information in their head, I guess, or needs to be, it's just a little silly. So that's one example of something we need this for, but I can do other examples too, so we know why it went from, hey, that'd be nice, to like, okay, we actually need to do this now. One of them is CodePen embeds, so those public-facing, iframes that end up getting put on other people's sites, which is, as we've said in the past, something like half of the traffic to CodePen, relatively important piece of infrastructure for us, has a script, and you just point to it, and that script it can't be fingerprinted, as they say. It can't have some big long hash in it, because then that'll get like permanently put on some third-party site. Like, that's not good. So the URL for that needs to be some nice script that's like codepen/embed.js, some kind of nice URL for it. But it also needs to be changeable and yada, yada, yada. So we have that script. Where do we freaking put it? And we just had weird different places we'd put it, and then we'd change the URL and need to maintain a redirect for life to it and stuff. And it just ended up being like, okay, that thing's annoying. So we need somewhere to, a system for that. Similarly, the preview, both on the old editor and the new, have some scripts that they link up in that preview. We had Steven on the show recently, and we talked about the heartbeat, which is this way of preventing infinite loops and stuff. That's part of that requires a script that needs to be linked up. That goes into the preview. That needs a URL to just be linked to. The console behavior needs the same thing. The favicons there, we have a lot of custom fonts. Those are in the same bucket as favicon is in. And here's like a niche-y CodePen one, is that there's like a setting, especially in the old editor, where you can just like turn on like prefix free, this old Leah Veru library that would help with prefixing. We put that in 14 years ago or something as like an option. You just click it on, and now you don't have to worry about vendor prefixes. An old concept. But where does that link to? Like, do we link to some a third-party CDN? Yeah, and we did for a long time. But, as you get older or whatever, a little more like we need control, which happens. We now host that on our own site, which means we need a URL to that library. So that's like, I don't know, 5 things right there. That's like, we need to do this. And sometimes those files really should be versioned. Fonts is one of them. They don't change that often, but we're trying to take advantage of browser caching. Like when your browser downloads some font, it should have, what's the longest header? Isn't it like a year or 10 years or something?
God, I have no idea. It's
max age header.
Yeah. I mean, you can like the expires and the max age and all that jazz. And I'm sure there's some way of making it infinite, but mostly I think you usually see it set for like a year, and then everybody just sort of forgets about it.
Some super long number or something, and that's good. Yeah. We want to take advantage of that. But should it come along, there's some vulnerability or new feature we want to take advantage of, whatever. We shouldn't be linking up that font at a URL with a year-long cache header so when we change that font, nobody that's already downloaded will get it. Not nobody, but people don't. Your average citizen isn't clearing their browser cache very often. We want a little bit more control over that.
Yeah, I mean, like the last option, the option of a last resort for anything like this is to have to reach out to all your users or put some splash, some splash pane on your on your website saying, hey, please clear your cookies or clear your browser cache because we don't know how to do this sort of thing.
That's hilarious. I would never. I don't know what.
Oh, you say that, but
that's beyond the pale.
I wouldn't commit to that, Chris, because there will come a day.
Someday we might screw it up. Yeah. Because caching is this complicated thing. You'd think, be like, well, can't you just go into your Cloudflare or whatever and clear the cache? Yeah, you can. That does not affect browser cache. That's a different layer on the old caching tree or whatever. So we don't. Our fonts are what we call, I don't know if it's the official term, it feels like it is, fingerprinted, meaning we don't link to like lato.ttf or whatever. Actually, they're WAF2 files these days. That's the kind of cross-browser standard, most efficient font file to host. We link to like lato dot blah, 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 numbers and letters and stuff, dot WAF. And that way, if we change it, the fingerprint changes and everybody gets the new copy of it. That's like the default behavior we want, I suppose. And then that means that any file that's linking to that font needs the fingerprint too, which is the kind of the one of the extra complicated parts in it. It's like, okay, so Next.js has this URL to this font file. Great. How does it have the fingerprinted one? Well,
right. I mean, these fingerprints, for at least what we do, is we run the contents of the file through a hash and use that to fingerprint the file. And, anything that references that file needs to, ultimately needs to know that file name. And
it does.
That gets problematic because you want to be able to use these things across your entire, your mono repo.
Right. In the same way we have, I don't know, like a folder full of components that it doesn't matter which site builder thing you're using, you still want to pull in the header component or whatever. And that feels a little bit more obvious or something. Like, yeah, of course, your mono repos pull in these things, but our mono repo needs access to these. They're essentially URLs. So isn't that, this is how it works. Yeah, but what you pull in you don't like import the font. You import this like index file that has the URL to the font in it. So if you're in Next.js, you pull in this like, at CodePen/public has this index in there that has all names of these like constants, string constants that know where that font is, and they know what the fingerprinted URL currently is. And then you use it when you're constructing your CSS or HTML or whatever.
Yeah, we've got a pretty elaborate stack. We have Rails, we have Next, we have Go. And so, but all of the, all these systems up and down our architecture, client to back end, turn out to need these, need to know what these files are called. And so one of the things we do in this public system is we build manifests of like what is in public and like the input file was here, like the consistent name of this file that came in maps to this new fingerprinted name on the back end, and having that layer of abstraction is essential. Like if you're gonna for any sort of system like this.
Yep, it is. And I think in those manifests, as we're calling them, we export the fingerprinted one, and I think maybe we export the non-fingerprinted one too, just to give ourselves some options. For example, that embed script I talked about is not fingerprinted, and sometimes we need to know that too. And then we just have to be super careful and rub our little fingers together so we don't have to do what Robert described there and say, when we serve that file, the expires header on it has to be low enough that it's okay. So I think that embed script has like a couple days or a week or something, because that one, when we push a new version of it, we need to, we do break the Cloudflare cache on it. And then we just know that we have to wait a little bit, that some people might have a couple days still. That's a lot. Okay, so just that fingerprinting, boom, we're in build process territory now. Like we cannot, these are no longer is this just a folder full of files sitting there. Some code needs to run.
Yeah.
It does.
Yep.
And so, okay, what does it do then? Because I think I probably took a crack at it, Shaw did too, and then eventually Robert got involved and was like, I'm gonna do this correctly.
Well, so this gets to that one of the asterisk projects that you sort of alluded to early on, which we can talk about in a bit. But when I got involved in this project, I came at this from some other with some other factors and considerations that came from developing other stuff within CodePen, where it was pretty obvious, like, if you want a system that takes files as input and transforms them to files as output, like you want to try and generalize that a bit so that you can do different things like fingerprinting or building a manifest or doing script compilation or image optimization. So
that's what your brain did. Then it says like those are just jobs. Those are just like things you need to do, and you should be able to say, do some of them but not other of them or whatever, right? Like have some control over which jobs are done.
Yeah, so we have I basically put together a little tool. I don't even remember what it's called, but it's like our public build tool that has builders in it. And you configure each builder to take, to look at a certain point, a certain portion of our source repo, and then when we need to run public, or we need to build public, like we run our builder, and it goes through all, it loads up each of these little builder plugins.
Just an NPM script or whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean it's exactly what you would expect. It's a little NPM script that that has a configuration file, and that it pulls in these different builder plugins. Yeah, and so
there's kind of a lot of jobs, and in there, I think that you designed it in a special way that was like, I don't know. I'm trying to cue it up for you nicely, but I think it's kind of like it takes URL paths with like stars and stuff in them that says like, watch all the CSS files, and you need to behave in this special way for those.
Yeah, so we're using, underneath the hood, we're using the Chockadar module to look at the file system, and Chockadar takes globs, glob patterns, if people are familiar with that term, which are sort of regular expression like patterns that that allow you to sort of define, like, I want all CSS files in the the blarg subdirectory or what have you, and then only work with those. So so that's one aspect of these builders. And the other thing is that there are some interdependencies. So, for example, one of our builders is the manifest builder. Well, that manifest builder needs to run after all of the other builders have already done their thing.
Oh, right. There's an order of these jobs. They're not all async. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's an order of operations here that needs to be considered, and so we take that into account as well. I mean, the other thing is that this is, we haven't really talked on this, but in addition to how files can change over time, we also have different environments. We have our dev environment, our staging environment, our production environment, and we need and the way in which these are built and configured varies a little bit from across all of those environments.
Yeah, because the URLs are different, for one thing. Yeah, that's a very good point. That you could just have this bucket of files that when you're in the dev environment, I don't know, it just links them up or figures it out or something. But then when you go to production, all this other fancy stuff happens. I think culturally that's not how we roll at CodePen. We're like, we're going to build a thing that basically behaves as closely as possible on all three different environments. So that's part of it.
At the end of the day, though, there is this challenge, and that's one of the reasons why we have this manifest, is that you've got different domains and different slightly different paths, and at least that's just how things seem to have turned out for CodePen. Is like, it's just different enough that you really don't want to be relying on hard coded strings and whatnot. So we try to abstract that out as much as possible.
Yeah,
but in order to do that, you got to configure that into this tool. So
okay. So this tool runs build jobs, and those build jobs could be optimize images, as you said. It builds the manifest files, crucial purpose of it. But it can also it runs TypeScript. So when we're writing scripts, we don't have to be hampered by not writing JavaScript how we normally do. We just give ourselves all the modern conveniences.
That was one of the things I really wanted to bring up was, if you have like an embed script or a script for preview or the heartbeat, detecting heartbeats across iframes, when you first write that, it's okay to just be like, oh, I'm just going to do a little vanilla script and I'm going to stick it out here on this, on the CDN on the URL. But as a shop, as a code shop, CodePen is, I think, made the transition to TypeScript over the last few years, and there's a lot of real code goodness that, sweetness that comes with that. And as soon as you have to kind of go back to writing raw sort of native JavaScript, you very quickly run into like all the, you miss all the guardrails that TypeScript provides, and it just becomes really
that's fair to
just
say.
Painful.
That's a little bit more, I don't know, production quality when we're bringing our...
exactly. Like, you're putting scripts out there that, like you said, like half of the traffic to CodePen is this embed script. Well, writing that in TypeScript gives you guardrails and protections, and like, it helps ensure you don't push something that you then have to tell all your users they got to clear their browser cache for to fix.
And if we have all the modern conveniences, we can even be writing tests and stuff, which we are, of course.
Yep.
So that's...
So one of our builders, one of the builders in public is an ES build builder. So we run all our TypeScript code through that. It does the magic sauce of bundling it exactly the way we expect it to be bundled, and the end result is a static file on the CDN, but and probably some source maps as well. So
right. And we do it kind of in the way, another way that you'd expect is that inside the public folder, there's a source and a dist, and source has all the stuff in it that messes with files. And ultimately the builder is responsible for producing that final dist file that has all the manifests, every single file that it needs. And and that needs to run last or whatever. The manifests need to run last and all that. And then at a meta level above that, we need to run this public script at the right time in our dev environment and our CI as well. Because like if the files that some other app is looking for are not there, you run the risk of errors happening during the bundling process of a Next.js app, for example. So that's all got to get done
that
the right way.
That was one of the things that I wanted to talk on, which is I think when we first took a pass at this, we were using rsync to like copy files around. But I think there were some cases where we were just like in our dev environment, we were just pointing to the raw source directory. And so we had kind of slightly different code paths between environments, and that invariably would lead to some subtle bug, popping up. Then we'd be like, well, why the hell is this happening? And so having a single tool that runs exactly the same way in dev, in CI, in staging, in production, helps eliminate that uncertainty that tends to cause problems. And that was one of the goals with this.
Yeah, amazing. Much, much, much better in that way. And then, so then all of our stuff needs to deploy. And we don't have just like one deploy script. The way that we run deployment is like you pick stuff that you want deployed at CodePen. And now public is just one of those things that you can choose to deploy. Little tricky. I think there's probably some rough edges to be sanded there sometimes. Because, like, for example, sometimes you're like, you probably shouldn't deploy, say, the new editor before you've deployed public or something, because it might, the new deployment might depend on some file in public or whatever. Or if it doesn't depend on it, it's going to get some old copy of it or something. And so they tend to have to sometimes. What's that? Is that the worst of it right at the moment?
Well, it's one of the interesting sort of aspects of CodePen is this deploy system we have that allows you to sort of deploy in bits and pieces, because there's always the risk that you make a change on the front end that isn't quite in sync with the back end, and one gets deployed and the other doesn't, and it's like, oh crap, this broke, and now we gotta we haven't pushed it, we haven't pushed the right subsystem in time yet. So,
and it's not like there's no intelligence there. There's plenty of like looking at the changed files and trying to figure out what should go and stuff. But public is I don't know, it just complicates it at some extra level. But fortunately, hasn't been the world's biggest problem yet. But if it did, if it did, that would be something. So we can go into our little admin app and just choose to deploy public if we want to. Unbelievably notably, I wrote that deployment script. You're welcome. I think it's one of those like GitHub Actions deals, and somebody else had written one for R2. R2 is Cloudflare's S3, but it's great. I think it has a really nice interface. You know, the APIs are fine. And then the pricing of it was Cloudflare trying to steal S3 business essentially. So they made this bold choice where you don't pay for, what did they call the word for it? It's like input and output bandwidth, but there's a word, egress or something.
Ingress and egress. Ingress is stuff coming in. Egress is stuff going out. Yeah.
Okay. So you
I don't
pay
know if
for
that's the
storage.
word they use, but yeah.
Yeah, it's probably in a blog post somewhere. We pay for like how much storage there is, which for some CSS files and JavaScript files and some fonts and images and stuff is pretty low, and our egress is super high. So unfortunately, we're really taking advantage of the Cloudflare train here. I hope you're not listening to this, Cloudflare, but that seems like the product you designed. So all it does is look at. I think it's super dumb, almost on purpose, that it just is like, oh, I see all these files in dist. Those need to go up to R2. Boop. And it just puts them up there. That's it. There's no like, sometimes we have scripts that we write called a Reaper that goes in there and like, maybe it's running a cron job or something, but it cleans up old crap. We haven't even gotten there yet. It doesn't even matter. Our storage, so for example, let's say you changed a JavaScript file 200 times. Well, there'll be 200 fingerprinted copies of that JavaScript file in our R2 bucket then, not sharing our dirty laundry a little bit here, but in a way it's like, who cares?
Yeah. I remember that conversation when we were developing this. It was like, yeah, we'll just, like there will never be files removed from this file system in production.
Yeah. It's a
like,
grow only deploy path. It's not entirely true. Someday we'll just clean it out or something. Like it wouldn't even be that hard to do. You just have to time a clear out and a fresh push at the same time and it would be fine.
Will we really though? Like, is anyone here really willing to take that chance?
No, we're absolutely not going to do that. We're going to do that when we fundamentally change it again.
Yeah. Like I think that's going to require a moment in time where we're like, okay, when we can, as a company, we can sort of take a deep breath and be like, okay, we're ready to like clear this stuff out and take the time to fix all this stuff that's probably going to break that we haven't thought about.
Totally. It's like spring cleaning too. Like imagine a calmer time at CodePen where we're like, what could we do? We'll make the intern do it next time.
Yeah.
All right. So part of this is like you built this special piece of node code essentially that does this. It's got it's got Chakadar. I think Chakadar even does the watching too, right? Or is that a different product? Yeah,
that is the main thing that Chakadar provides, is the ability to watch a file system in real time and get notified when things change.
Which you don't need in production, you don't need in staging, you don't need in CI, you need in dev.
Yeah,
because we're giving ourselves
development.
Yeah, you're right. Because somebody else is working, they chuck some new image into public. They don't want to be like, oh yeah, I guess I better run npm run public build or something. No, there should be a watcher. It should be watching that folder. It can see there's a new file in there, and it builds all that manifest crap for you in dev immediately. Not the hardest thing in the world, but it's one more watcher. How many watchers do you think we have? Too many, right? Like, I don't know.
Well, and that's
something.
So one of the things that came out of this for me was, as I was working on this, was sort of this realization that there are three ways in which a build tool like this gets used. One is, you build the actual production build, and that's basically take all the stuff on the input, build it, put it on the output. Put it in production. So doing sort of massive, wholesale builds of your code base. The other one is the hot reloading. It's sort of the kind of hot module reloading. It's like you change one little thing, you want to make sure that change gets propagated as quickly as possible to the output, because it talks to your development cycle time. Like, how long does it take you to actually hit refresh and see the change that you made take effect? So that's really important. And then the last one is and I think pretty much any production, any professional development environment, you have pre-commit checks. You have checks that run when you commit code to the repository to keep you from committing stuff that shouldn't go in. And so in that case, like, you want to be watching an input file system and verifying that any of these build processes you have that end up in your repository, that those stay in sync. And so that was another aspect of this that not as relevant with this public process, but it's certainly relevant with a lot of these kind of building, little build scripts that run, and that what we have in public is really just part of that. So
yeah. Because maybe it's a little obvious, but dist doesn't even go to the repo. Like any good dist folder, those are build artifacts. CI produces those. We don't commit them. They're just in the git ignore file and all that.
Yeah, that's
right. They better.
Yeah, no, that's very true. And I went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but but once you start watching source code for changes and to run, especially in development where you want to propagate those changes in real time, you start to notice like there's a lot of use cases for that basic, like, oh, we got to watch this file here and make sure this file over here changes.
I see. Yeah. And I think that's maybe I see where you're going with this, is that we have this now for public, but actually we have this kind of need all the hell over the app. And they're not all using this latest, greatest system. So I think your goal is maybe like finish this as like a standalone system, publish it, and then move more of our parts of our app to this.
Yeah,
so it's just more consistent or something.
Yeah. So so I've, in developing public, I kind of found myself wanting a tool that was good at all three of these sort of use cases of doing full builds, watching for real-time changes, and doing pre-commit checks. Because,
right. And so I think some people would be like, okay, so you need a build tool? You're going to make your own? There's so many build tools. Like, what the hell, Even in my brain, and I don't even think of it as old, really. Actually, we had the Gulp guy on Shop Talk, I don't know, a year ago or something. It's still pretty actively maintained. And so somehow I think of that one because I have used it the most times. And in fact, I used it just on the CodePen blog word build process just recently because I was like, oh, we have this new host and I need to do essentially fingerprinting there too. But that project is our WordPress site's kind of separate from our code base asterisk project, I guess. And so I needed to put it there, and I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do Gulp. And you know what? I even had like some Google AI thing do it for me. But I was good enough at Gulp that I saw what it was doing, and it did a great job, and it's fine. So Gulp already exists, Robert,
That's a great question, Chris. And, honestly, it is a great question. It would not surprise me at all if somebody wrote in and said, well, you should really just be using this thing over here. But the use case for me, like the particular pain that I've experienced, and that's leading me to write a new tool, something that I'm calling CodeWatch. It's not yet released, but it's in development.
Did you get the NPM name? I bet you did.
I did. I did get the NPM name. So I'm very pleased. I couldn't believe CodeWatch wasn't taken. So
that's not in the show notes. I just know how Robert rolls.
Yeah, listeners, if you want to go to the CodeWatch on NPM, you'll find a nice placeholder page. So you're welcome. My point, where I was going with this was that I think one of the trickiest parts of doing a build tool is the development cycle, is where you do that real-time updates. And to give you an example of this, one of the tasks that we have, one of the scripts we have currently is for auto-generating indexes across our JavaScript directories. So if you have a component, and that component is part of a subdirectory of related components, and that subdirectory is part of a project. Like, we want to build index files that export all of that stuff so that we're not, so that our...
Yeah, what do they call that? Barrel files or whatever? That's just a choice we made that's like, those files should be named like the component is named. You don't have to do that, but we just decided it was nicer to do that, giving ourselves this job.
Right, and so, to our credit, like we've come up with a script that auto generates these files, and the way it works is great and not terribly relevant to this conversation. But in order to build that index file, you've got to scan the entire file system, and then if one changes, like either you rescan the entire file system or you somehow maintain that state in cache, and you update it accordingly. But but build tools aren't really designed for that. Like most of these build tools aren't designed for that development mode of run the build and then do incremental updates as individual files change. And that's
they're designed to run in CI with no cache or whatever. Just do your job. Which, if it takes 2 minutes, it takes 2 minutes. 2 minutes is not acceptable in dev, right?
Well, if it takes 2 minutes, then, your developers are sitting there scratching their armpits, waiting for the build to finish, or they go off to get a Coke and they come back 15 minutes later, and now that 2 minute cycle's turned into a 20-minute or half-hour cycle.
Yeah.
So I wanted a tool that was, that sort of did two things. It met that dev mode requirement of allowing for really quick incremental updates, and that it also used the exact same code path when doing full production builds or CI builds versus these sort of finite changes. So anyways, CodeWatch is built on Chocodar, which is a module that allows you to watch a file system in real time and emits events for, file added, file change, directory added, file and new file and directory deleted, etc., all that jazz. And so and that's basically how those builders that we have in public operate. But now, like I'm rewriting those so that they are really event-based build tool. And it's based on plugins. And so, I think we have 3 or 4 builders currently in public. There are 4 types of builders. There's the manifest builder, there's static file builder, there's the ES build, and I don't remember if there's another one or not. I forget. But with CodeWatch, one of the other things is that we've got like 3 or 4 other scripts out there that do this kind of building as part of our production and development mode.
Yeah, sometimes they're really simple, right? Like watch, run TypeScript, move files here. And they're not using this CodeWatch thing. They're just a handwritten script, right?
Yeah, so we've got like it turns out a lot of these are actually solving problems with TypeScript. As it turns out, one of the classic problems with TypeScript is you have a source directory, you have a dist directory. TypeScript will build all your TypeScript files in the source directory and copy them over to the dist directory, but anything else it ignores. So like if you have CSS files
you've had
or
this be in your bonnet
SVG,
for a minute, right?
Oh my God, it's like
TSC should have this ability to move a different file that's not a JavaScript file, and they are steadfast against you. They're like, no, it will never
TypeScript
do
is not a build tool, or it's not a bundler. Like that is a line they will never cross. And so as a developer, it's like, okay, I got to go find some tool that knows how to copy everything except for TypeScript from this folder to that folder. So one of the watchers or one of the builders that I have is just a static file copier, except it does hard links. So which is a very specialized form of copy, but it actually is very efficient. And so your changes in real time, changes to any non-TS file get copied over immediately, and like you just don't have to think about it. It's great. There's also like if you change a file, like if you have a TypeScript file that's named TSX and you rename it to TS, like the corresponding JSX file that it built will just sit there. So you now have multiple copies of the same source file. You have
which actually causes a problem with imports. Sometimes.
Yeah, so you end up with these stale files in the dist directory that can sort of end up in your final build, and you're like, why in the heck is this? Which manifest
in Slack messages being like, just delete your node stuff. Just do a wipe all. That a wipe all is our little internal super tool for like, just screw it. Just crush it all and start over.
Yeah. So like, so I've got a watcher that'll do that. It'll clean up the obsolete build artifacts.
I can't tell you how many hours that stupid thing has saved us at this point.
Yeah. So, and then more recently, I was just talking to Steven the other day, and we were trying to track down an issue. When you were using workspaces like NPM or Yarn workspaces, you create these dependencies, across the various packages in your monorepo. Well, if those packages are TypeScript, you also have to mirror those dependencies as references in the tsconfig file, and that's something that it tends to get forgotten. So you end up with TypeScript build dependencies that aren't consistent with your ESM import dependencies, and we've had any number of issues with that. So one of the watchers that
I remember that coming up. That was what the problem was. Oh
yeah, well, I think it was that was in amidst the issue that we have. So so basically having a watcher that makes sure that we have consistent consistent references in tsconfig that align with our ESM imports will hopefully avoid that issue. So
yeah, so it's okay. I'm attracted to the idea that that's built into this tool, and then if you use this tool, you get that behavior, like, quote unquote, for free. That would be nice.
Yeah,
because those little problems really bother me.
Yeah, so I mean, there's probably half a dozen. Like, wouldn't it be great if we could just watch the file system and do this one little automated thing, and have that, and do that in an optimized way that is fast in dev. So hopefully this will enable that, and I'm looking forward to swapping out the 4 or 5 scripts we have that all use Chakadar and are doing basically the same thing. And public is one of them. So
totally.
Yeah.
There's one other little thing I don't know how interesting it is, but we could probably end on it. It's just that the tool needs to like suck in environment variables to do what it's doing too. That's part of the configuration for it, right? As being like, okay, I need some little pieces of information about what URL. That's where we, on staging, the URL would be like CodePen assets staging.com, some fake URL that works in our staging system but nowhere else or something. Where do you put that stuff? It has to be in an env file, so your system kind of honors those as well. Maybe that's just because it's Node, but
yeah, I think we kind of get that for free. I honestly don't remember what we did. I remember that being an issue. I don't remember what exactly we did there, but I know
no,
ENV
it wasn't
files
for
were part
free.
of
It sucked somehow. I can't remember why.
I know. And now I'm wishing I'd looked at that bit of code before getting on this podcast.
Yeah,
so I honestly
can't remember why. It was like sometimes because we use GitHub Actions, and when you have a GitHub Actions, it has in it commands like yarn run build or whatever.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to put like a -- thing in there to like teach it where the env file is. So you can't just yarn run build. You have to in that command, you have to tell it where the env file is so that it turns those things into variables right. And I don't think it was big problems with it. I just remember it being more complicated than I wanted it to be.
Well, I mean, one of the things you try and do, and certainly GitHub Actions and our deploy in our various build environments encourage this, is you try to lock things down to be as similar as possible. And so, between Docker and CI and our build environments, there's actually very few ways that you can do things differently across these environments. But sometimes they need to be different. And domain names is a classic example of that. So yeah, I think
it is. That's one thing that's very different, because these things need a URL in dev too, and it's just different. It's a little Go server that poops them out, which is configured a little bit differently than our production servers, which one of them has Nginx in front of them and the other doesn't, and little stuff that damn it, why does it have to be different? I think we were just trying to avoid a Docker container for it or something, but who knows? This stuff will change in time. And CodeWatch is not done, but, bookmark the URL. Maybe Robert will finish it someday. It looks cool. I don't know. I like the idea that it's, why not use Gulp? You probably could have absolutely jacked one of these utilities to do this if you wanted to, but it's not the same. Even Gulp doesn't even really have a watcher built in. Maybe it does these days, but some of these things have you want to watch it? Well, then, use the Gulp watch plugin or something. And you're like, I don't want to plug in. That's core ass behavior. That's what this thing should do. So your tool will just, you won't have to add the CodeWatch watcher. It's already a watcher. That's what it does.
Yep. Yeah. So I think we've covered it.
Yeah, I think we did it. Thanks, Robert. We went a little long on it, but that's what we do sometimes. Thanks for listening, everybody, and we'll have Robert back to talk about something else that he's forgotten about.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, see you later. Bye-bye.